Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. So before we get started, I do want to remind everybody that the last day to withdraw from a class without penalty is Friday. Right? So if you don't feel you should be continuing in this class, if you feel like you would be better off withdrawing, the last day to do that is Friday. Now for Thursday, right, what I've got on the board here, this is what I want you to do. We're going to be starting work on the research paper in the next couple of weeks. So I want you to get used to using the library resources, and I want you to get accustomed to examining sources closely, right? So here's what we're going to do for Thursday. You are going to go home, you're going to choose your favorite book, poem, film, story, TV show, what have you, right? Some media property that you really, really love, right? Something you actually feel connected to. You're going to use the library databases that we're going to talk about today to find 2 peer-reviewed journal articles about your chosen text. Those articles should address the same broad theme, right? So say, for the sake of argument, that your chosen text is Hamlet. It probably won't be, but let's just say it is, right? So what you will want to do is not just find sources that are about Hamlet, but they're about some issue in Hamlet, right? Like 2 sources that are about Hamlet and the ghost, or they're about the role of women in Hamlet, or some such thing, right? So try to find 2 articles that address the same broad theme about your chosen text. You're going to print out those articles, you're going to bring them to class for an in-class exercise. It would be a good idea if you read over and familiarize yourself with the articles and their basic content before you come to class. Now, if you show up without your 2 articles, right, you're not going and printing them out during class time, right? I've kind of had it with that shit. I've had it with people showing up unprepared. You show up prepared, or I send you home and mark you absent, right? If you show up without your 2 articles, you will be dismissed and you will be marked absent, right? So that gets cleared off of your 3 permitted absences. So make sure that you show up ready to do this. I'm not going to let people walk down to the computer lab and print something out. Take 20 minutes to print something out, right? Not happening. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about this?
Is that suggested or is that required?
This is required. This is not suggested.
Oh, not the whole thing. I'm talking about, it says use the library databases.
No, you are required to use the library databases. Every step on here is not suggested. Every step on here is required. Right, and I will explain to you in a moment why I want you specifically using the library databases and not using Google or other sort of mainstream search engines. I want you to get comfortable with the resources that the library offers because this is going to help you in future classes. Okay, any other questions about this? All right, has everybody got this down? Okay, great. So how many of you have done a research paper before? Okay, that's a couple of you, good. For what, did you do it for a class here at GSW? Okay, right, well, right, because you're new here, right? Yes, this is your first semester. So you did one in Comp 1. All right, what kind of sources did you use for your research paper in Comp 1?
Galileo.
Okay, mostly Galileo?
We came here and got sources.
Oh, okay, so it was an advanced high school class? Okay.
It was college.
Okay. So a lot of you have already used the library databases, at least for one project. All right, good. So we're not going in here completely cold. So if I'm telling you things that you already know, or that seem redundant to you, just let me know, and we'll move on to something else, right? We'll take as much time on this as we need to. Okay, so first issue to get around. Who can tell me the difference between a primary and a secondary source? What is a primary source?
It's like the straight, like the very first one. It's not like
The
somebody,
original?
yeah, like the original, like not somebody that didn't read it and then rest of it got it.
Yeah, it's whatever it is you're actually working on, right? Yeah, your primary source is your actual subject. So if you are writing an analysis of the U.S. Constitution, right, the U.S. Constitution is your primary source. Right? Okay, good. So this is what you're working on. And then what is a secondary source?
The summary or peer review about the primary source.
Yeah, essentially anything that illuminates, elucidates, explains, analyzes your primary source, right? So yeah, the secondary source is anything you're using to explain or analyze your primary source. So if you are looking at, say, a 19th century American novel that has a lot of references to, to legal codes, the law, right? You might be using the US Constitution then as a secondary source to illuminate certain issues in that primary source, right? So some things can be a primary source and a secondary source. Most of the things we're going to be looking at, though, are going to be things that can only really be used as a secondary source. Most of the sorts of things that I want you to be using on this paper. So next distinction we want to think about is the difference between an academic and a popular source. What's a popular source?
Like a magazine.
Wikipedia would be an example, a magazine would be an example, yeah.
Things subject to public opinion.
Public opinion, probably not so much, right? It's more about who it's written for, right? So the average American news magazine, for example, is written at about a 6th grade reading level, as is the average American newspaper, right? There are some that are for more specialized audiences that are written, at a slightly higher level. But yeah, by and large, what a popular publication is trying to do is reach the broadest possible audience, right? Even, a relatively highbrow newspaper like the Washington Post or the New York Times or the Boston Globe, right? These write at a sort of high elementary school reading level so that more people can grasp the concepts. And you're not typically going to get a popular source grappling with extremely difficult academic issues, right? They don't usually get all that specialized. The language is very kind of clear-cut. What you can glean from them for an academic research project is limited, right? So an academic source is written specifically for a scholarly audience, right? For an informed, educated, scholarly audience that, at least to some extent, understands the issues at stake in a particular academic discipline, right? So what sorts of things would be academic sources?
Google Scholar? Is that what you already said?
There are things you can't, well, what sorts of things do you find on Google Scholar?
Or just articles, like peer review articles?
Exactly, you find journal articles.
Like a periodical?
Yeah, these would, right, journal articles would be the kind of periodicals you would use for an academic essay, right, for an academic paper. You'll find journal articles, you'll find books by experts
So
in a particular field. Go ahead.
do Galileo count as academic since they have peer reviews?
Yeah, peer review is a very, very important distinguishing factor here, right? Yeah, you're going to want to use, by and large, secondary academic sources for this paper, in part because of that peer review process. Does everybody know how academic peer review works? Okay, essentially what happens, right? Say I write an article and I want to get it published in a journal. I send it to the editor of that journal. The editor reads it over to make sure it's not complete bullshit. If it is complete bullshit and he thinks so, he sends it back to me and says, this is complete bullshit. Probably in nicer terms. Usually this isn't right for our journal. If he doesn't find it to be complete and utter bullshit, what he will do is send it to 2 or 3 experts in my field, right? So say like I've written, an article on the poetry of W.B. Yeats. So he'll send it to 3 Yeats scholars, and they'll read it over, and they'll make comments on it, right? And they will determine whether or not this is within the mainstream of scholarly ideas, right? And whether or not the argument is interesting and well-made enough to be published. Usually what happens is they get back to you and say, you need to make X number of changes, and then we'll determine whether to publish it or not. But the point of peer review is that it goes through a process of being reviewed by experts in the field, right, to make sure that the journal is only publishing responsible scholarship. So just about any journal that you find using our library databases, which are all hooked into Galileo, most of those are going to be peer-reviewed. Google Scholar is a slightly dodgier proposition, in part because you often can't get complete books or articles from Google Scholar, right? Their licensing agreements with publishers are sometimes a little bit fishy, and I know, I know you guys don't want to have to pay for books to do your papers, right? And I don't want you to have to pay for books or articles to do your papers. But Google Scholar will sometimes charge you for complete access to something. Otherwise, it might just sort of give you like a few sample pages, kind of like what you would find on Amazon.com. Yeah, sometimes just an abstract, sometimes just like look inside, and you can click on it. It'll give you the table of contents, and you can see, aha, yes, that is exactly what I need, but I can't get it. Right. So yeah, this is one of the reasons I prefer you stick to using the library. Now, when we talk about using search engines in general, right? If we look at a search engine like Google, for example, or Bing, or Yahoo, does anybody even still use Yahoo? No? Yeah, I didn't think so. What? Okay. All right, so people do still use Yahoo for something. Good for you, Yahoo. All right. Does anybody know how a search engine like Google works? How does it come up with results to give you? Yeah, it's essentially, the results are essentially ranked by popularity, right? So, either most sites that are most often linked to by other sites or sites that are most often visited, right? Their actual algorithm is apparently proprietary and they won't tell you precisely how they do it. The point is though, right, does a human being actually review any of these sites for accuracy?
I think they use a web crawler with that algorithm, and it surveys all these websites that are looked up, and then they compile that into your search page when you type something.
Right, but it's my point is that it's automated, right? It's not a person who actually looks the sites over, right?
Yeah, it's the algorithm.
Right. So no one has actually read these websites before suggesting them to you. It's just a machine has found, okay, your search terms are on these pages are the most popular, so this is what I'm going to give you. And that's fine when you're just doing sort of like a quick search for general information. But if you're doing an actual research project, that won't serve you especially well. There is a website you can go to. It's a specialized scholarly search engine. It's called IPL2. I don't really want you using it for this project. I prefer you to stick to the library, but I want you to be aware of its existence just for your future edification, right? And you'll find it at www.ipl.org. And IPL is put together by reference librarians working in particular academic disciplines. Right, so all of the sites they will suggest, like if you do a search on T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland, right, every website that comes up about the wasteland has been vetted by a reference librarian who has some sense of what he or she is talking about. Now, when you look over a website, how can you determine whether or not what you're getting on that site is good and or valid information? How can you tell whether or not you can trust a website?
Sources?
Okay, yeah, does it cite sources? That's good, yeah. Yeah, if the website cites sources, and they seem to be good, responsible, scholarly sources, then chances are you can trust the information that it provides. How else might you be able to determine whether or not a website is actually worth your time?
If it says like .edu.
Okay, yeah, you can look at the domain name. Right, there are 4 common domain names, or the 4 most common domain names in the United States. Right, .com, .org, .edu, and .gov. Right, what does .com stand for? Anybody know? Yeah, exactly, commercial. So ultimately, the purpose of a .com website is to make money, right? Whether it's through selling advertising, through selling some sort of product, whatever, right? There's a profit motive involved there. What about .org?
Organization.
Yeah, organization. Yes, good. So what kinds of organizations would have .org
Charity.
addresses? Yeah, charities, basically any kind of nonprofit organization, right? Any kind of nonprofit operation. And we like nonprofits, right? Nonprofits are good. Nonprofits make us feel nice. Are all nonprofits actually nice?
No.
No. In fact, most nonprofits, even the nice ones, do have a particular agenda, right? And are going to push a particular point of view. So it is imperative, if you're looking at information on a .org website, that you know exactly who is hosting it and what their goals are, what their actual interests are. For example, should you trust information about how great and advanced and environmentally friendly clean coal technology is from a website that is hosted by Coal Producers of America? Because what do they really want to do? They want to sell more coal, right? Yeah. So of course they're going to tell you that coal is great, right? They're going to give you the upsides without the downsides. Right? A lot of nonprofit organizations are lobbying organizations for, say like large business interests, right? So you have to be very careful with .coms and with .org addresses. Now, what about .edu? Education, yes. We're talking about websites that are hosted by educational institutions, K-12 or higher ed. And by and large, these are among the sort of more trustworthy web denizens. But there are a couple of things that you still have to be a little bit wary of. One, when you're looking at information on a university's website, check out their mission statement, right? It's usually on the About page. Because not all universities are founded for the same purposes or are dedicated to the neutral promotion of objective information, right? For example, if you are doing a biology paper, are you going to get unbiased objective information about Darwin's theory of evolution from the website of, say, Liberty University in Virginia, right, which is run by Jerry Falwell? Probably not, right? Now, you could certainly use that as a primary source if you're looking at evangelical attitudes towards the theory of evolution, right? But if you're actually just writing a paper about evolution, it's probably not going to help you all that much. Another thing to be wary of in .edu addresses. Say you see an address that looks something like this, right? gsw.edu, and I'll just throw that in there for /English / squiggly thing, person's last name. What's that mean?
It means that it was written by that person that was put on that website.
Yeah, it's a personal website on the university server. So this would be like, if I had a personal website on the GSW server, this would be its domain. This would be its URL, right?
I think some people do.
So some people do. Some people do. I'm sure some people do here. I know people certainly do at other universities. And sometimes these are resources that instructors have put together for specific classes, right? Sometimes there are pages that have been put together by students for individual projects. Now, what you need to be careful about in looking at pages with URLs like this is figuring out the difference. If the page was put together by another student, should you use it as a secondary source? Probably not, right? Because even if it's a really good project, that student is not yet a credentialed expert in that field. They might be working towards it, they might be getting there, but in general, you should only use sources that have been produced by credentialed experts. Now, if it appears that the person who put together the site is a faculty member, should you use it? Maybe, right? It depends, right? Does it meet some of these other criteria, right? Does it cite sources? And it's also a good idea to look that faculty member up. This is one thing Google would be useful for, right? Do a quick Google search on this person, right? Do they present at conferences? Are there any sites denouncing this person as a crank, right? Make sure you know who this person is and that they actually do work in that particular field. And that, brings us to third issue here, right? Does anyone take responsibility for this material? Right? Can you find an author on the site? If the site does not name an author for any of this material, in general, it's best not to use it. Right? You need to be able to trace it back to some person, or at least some organization. And sometimes it's also a good idea to figure out exactly who is hosting the website. Again, to get back to this issue. There used to be a website, I think it's since been taken down. It was martinlutherkingjr.org. And if you went to the site It had a database of King's speeches, audio and text. It had video of Dr. King. It had a timeline of his career, lots of pictures. It looked very professionally done, very well put together, particularly by the standards of, like the early 2000s internet, which are lower than today's standards. But that's what I grew up with. So if you actually scroll down the page, you start seeing some things that look a little bit troubling. Like they start quoting things that Dr. King said about white women. You go a little further down, and it says, how to get your school to revoke the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. And if you go all the way down, you find a little button at the bottom that says stormfront.org. Do any of you know what Stormfront is? Stormfront is a white supremacist organization based in Florida. So this whole site was designed to sucker careless people in, right? To promote a white supremacist agenda. So this is why you have to be very, very, very careful about figuring out who is responsible for the material on any website that you're looking at, any website that you're using for research or what have you. Now, when you do have to do web research, what usually is your first go-to? Okay. That's where you're supposed to go, right? Where do a lot of people actually go first? Google. And what's usually about the first thing Google turns up? Wikipedia, yes. So let's just talk for a brief moment about Wikipedia. Look, honestly, like as a general source of information, Wikipedia is not terrible, right? If you just need, a quick summation of some particular point, if you just need a quick definition or a quick date, for some particular event, what have you, Wikipedia can do that for you, right? The basic problem with Wikipedia from a research standpoint is that it is just an encyclopedia. It's not going to give you deep, specialized analytical content. It's going to give you a broad overview of a topic for a general audience, like any other popular source. Now, there are some particular red flags that you should be aware of with Wikipedia, just because of the very nature of what it is, right? Because it is editable by the world community, people can come in and monkey with it. It's harder to do that than it used to be. The community is a little bit better policed. But I'll give you an example. I hesitate to call this guy a colleague. I knew this idiot when I was in grad school who would go in and edit all of the web pages on British Romantic poets to prove that none of them were ever gay at all, and that anything they ever wrote that sounded like maybe it was a little bit gay, there was some other good reason for. One, this is not true. Two, this is completely freaking pointless, right? So this weirdo with his own bizarre axe to grind can just go in and mess with Wikipedia and change articles, right? People can still do this. Be careful about that. I think Stephen Colbert once instructed his viewers to go and save the African elephant by going to the Wikipedia article and changing the number of them that you can find in the wild, right? Yay, the African elephant made a comeback. One thing, though, you can get from Wikipedia or from any other encyclopedia, what would this actually be good for if you're doing a research project? Pardon? Oh.
Sources.
Yes, most articles will have, will have sources at the bottom, right? Suggested reading, a bibliography. And provided the article doesn't have any other red flags, right? Look at the top to make sure it doesn't have that bar that's like the neutrality of this article is disputed, or this article doesn't cite sources, or one of those other such things. But yeah, you can actually find sources, better, more analytical sources, through Wikipedia or through other encyclopedias. All right, so that's Wikipedia. There was something else. Oh, right, we never got around to this fourth URL, this fourth domain name type here. .gov, everybody knows that's government, right? What sorts of things will you usually find on a .gov site?
Statistical data about the country.
Yeah, usually the stuff that would be most useful to any of you for any particular project you're doing on a .gov site would be statistical data. You know, census data, government surveys. Actually, any research that is funded with government money is required by law to be made public. Right? So if your tax dollars paid for it, the government has to post it. So you can find all sorts of, particularly if you're doing like sociology projects or political science projects, you can find really good stuff on .gov sites. There won't be much on a .gov site to help you with this project, with anything in this class, but certainly you can get stuff for it for other classes from there. Okay, any questions about anything so far? No? All right, so let's talk a little bit then about how to do a good specific search in the library databases. Now, some of you say you've used Galileo before. How did you use it? Did you go into specific databases, or did you just type things into the Galileo search bar?
I went to like the, it was in high school a long time ago.
Uh-huh.
I can't remember. If you pull it up, I can tell you what it is.
Okay.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Like on the side, it says like we had to do like peer review.
Uh-huh.
So you could like peer review full text, and then you click that, and then you type in something that kind of corresponds with your topic.
Yeah.
And then it'll pull up like full text stuff and peer review stuff.
Yeah. You can actually you can set that filter on a lot of the databases, right? I only want to search things that are peer reviewed. Right, okay, so in general, right, we all know, right, we get there, we just click on library at the top of the page here, and we find Galileo down here. Now, if you do just type search terms into the Galileo bar, it's going to search every database that hooks into Galileo. So you're going to end up with a lot of static if you do it that way, right? A lot of the results you get won't actually be useful to you. So the best way to get good specific results for your particular project is to look in specific databases, right? So we go to browse by subject. I think, does everybody know, by the way, what the Galileo password is this term?
It's a sign.
A sign, yes. So for those of you who don't know it, let's just put it up here. And you don't typically need it if you're logging in on campus, but if you're trying to log in from any computer off campus, you will need the password. All right, so for our purposes, the most useful database is going to be literature, language, and literary criticism.
That's the one it
Okay. This was in 1101?
is. No, this is, I'm a junior, so I graduated from A&M College, and that's the one we use.
Oh, okay. Okay, right, I
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay. I didn't know, okay, I didn't know you were transferred.
Yeah.
All right. So, literature and lit crit. And it gives you a couple of choices here. Probably the best for what we're doing are JSTOR, Literary Reference Center, Lion, and the MLA bibliography. A lot of these others aren't actually going to give you all that much that would actually help you with this project. So let's start with JSTOR. JSTOR will actually give you full text peer-reviewed articles, but you do also have to be a little bit careful with it because you can end up with many, many more results than are actually helpful to you, and then there's a lot that you have to sift through. So you always want to make sure that you do an advanced search with JSTOR. Right? Don't just do the basic search. And essentially the way this is set up, right, you just enter your basic Boolean search terms. You can do an and or not, right? Anything you can do to finesse any kind of web search. So let's do a search on Hamlet and ghost and revenge. Let's narrow to articles and books. You can also narrow the date range to get fewer results. So let's say we don't want anything before 1975. And we can even filter by academic discipline, right, to further limit the number of hits we get. In general, unless you're getting no results, fewer results is a good thing. It's good to start with as specific a search as possible, and then if you don't get hits, then start broadening out. So let's see, let's do British Studies. Language and literature, and performing arts. So it'll only search journals in those fields. And we get 2 results. Right, now one of the great things about JSTOR is that you don't have to go anywhere or do anything else to get these results. Right, all you have to do is click on download PDF. I accept, receive the PDF. And then when this comes up, you can save it to your computer, and this article is yours for as long as you want it, right? There's no time limit on it. You don't have to keep going back to it. Just download it and save it, and you can keep it. Okay, so 2 results, like we only got 2 results here, right? But we need a total of 5 sources for the paper. So let's think about ways we can broaden this out, right? Essentially, I can make this broader by removing one of my search terms, right? So let's take revenge out and see what we get. We get absolutely nothing. All right, let's try modify search. And we'll just do Hamlet and ghost. Same parameters. That's all already clicked. And now we get a lot more, right? So we may have to do a little bit of sifting. Right, you click on these, you click on the article title, it'll give you a little abstract or a first page or something. Maybe you can look it over and see if this is something that's actually useful to you. Okay, any questions about JSTOR? Now, the great thing about JSTOR is that you can always access the articles directly from the page. I'm going to show you the MLA International Bibliography as well, which doesn't always let you do that. But there are still ways you can get the information, even if you can't even if you can't go right to the PDF. All right, so browse by subjects, language, literature, literate, and we go to the MLA International Bibliography. Okay, so let's try same search terms. Hamlet and ghost and revenge. Okay, we set our publication date there. We set to only get peer-reviewed sources. And it gives us 6 results. 2 of which we can access right from here. 1 of which appears to be in Korean. But we can fix that, right? You can further limit the results by languages. Let's make sure we're only getting things that are in English. And here we go. 5 sources. Now, so what do we do if one of these sources is not actually available? If we want one of these sources, right? This first one, right? Okay, this looks like just what I need for my paper. But the library doesn't connect to the PDF full text. What do I do? Anybody have any idea? You don't actually have to take it over to GillFind. There's an easier way to do this. We subscribe to an interlibrary loan service called Iliad. You can get to Iliad right from the library drop down on the home page. Right. If you don't have an account, click on this to create one. First time users, click here. It'll ask you a bunch of questions, right? You just fill in all of these fields. Right? You just need your name, your ID number, email address, and all that. I'll come up with a username and so on and so forth. If you're not a first-time user, just click to log in. And one of the cool things about Iliad is that if you don't actually need, if you don't need a whole book, you just need a chapter of a book, you can actually request that chapter and they'll scan it and send it to you. But most of what we're gonna need, right? Most of the things you're gonna be looking for are articles. So click on article, and we just fill out the form. Okay, journal title is Renaissance Drama. Article title, Giving Up the Ghost in a World of Decay. Author Robert Watson. Volume 21. No issue. Bless you. No month. 1990. Pages 1999. 199 to 223. And then you would just click Submit Request. And what this will do is send your request out to all the other libraries in North America that subscribe to Iliad. And if somebody has this article, and this is a fairly common journal, so someone will, they will scan a copy and they'll upload it to your Iliad page. You'll get an email when it arrives. And you can click on electronically received articles, and there'll be a little PDF link on one of these that you can click on. It'll open the PDF for you, and again, you can just save it to your computer, and it's yours in perpetuity. Right? So this is actually a way easier thing to do than trying to find a physical copy of the journal through GillFind. Now, it may be, though, that you need to use GillFind for certain things, right? You may need to find a book. So, if you're using GillFind right now, you guys have been to our library, right? You've used our library. Do they have very much stuff?
A lot of books.
Well, compared to other libraries in the system, we are tiny and underfunded. We really don't have a lot of books. So a lot of books that you would turn up in an MLA International Bibliography Search, for example, are not going to be in our library. Now, the good thing is that we're hooked into a statewide consortium that adds up to one really good library. In fact, there are, like, the University of Georgia and Georgia State actually have very, very good libraries. So you can get just about anything you need, even if you can't get it here. Right? You would use Guildfind Express, right, which is a universal catalog, and say, okay, so there is a book that I'm looking for. I know the author's name. It's on Oscar Wilde. So we search by author. You can also search by title, title subject, what have you. All right, and let's see. So, right.